Thanks for coming, everyone. So yeah, I'm a postdoc in the machine learning department working on the Read the Web project with Tom Mitchell. So my background is in large-scale, semi-supervised, and active learning for information extraction. But I'm not going to talk about any of that stuff today. Instead of talking about research that was actually born out of my research life, I'm going to talk about research that was born out of my personal life. So I'm also a musician. And this is me here. I play in a band called Delicious Pastries. And for those of you who've maybe been around for more than a semester or two might remember Jacob Eisenstein, who was up until recently a postdoc, also in the machine learning department. So he was our bass player in the band. He's now in Atlanta as an assistant professor at Georgia Tech. So we miss him dearly, but the band must go on. So we have a new bass player. We actually have a couple of gigs coming up, so I thought I'd take the opportunity to plug these. Not this Friday, but the next 2 Friday nights. We're playing downtown at Future Tenant and then on April 20th at Brillo Box. So anyway, come out and see us. But actually, I'm not talking about research that was born out of this band, but a different musical project that I'm involved with called FALM.org, where FALM stands for February Album Writing Month. And it's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. The goal is to write an entire album's worth of music in the month of February, or 14 songs in 28 days. Or if it's a leap year like this year was, 14 and a half songs in 29 days. And that half song is actually going to turn out to be kind of important later on. But we'll get back to that. A brief introduction to FALM is, so it's an online goal-setting community. It's kind of a social networking website, and it's an annual challenge. So every year in February, this website goes up, and people from all over the world sign up and to take on this challenge of writing 14 songs in that month. So to date, we've had about 7,000 total registered users. Not all of those are active. In any given year, maybe 1,500 or so people are actually active, but from all 7 continents, and we've collectively written about 50,000 new songs, all in the months of February. And so I actually created this project in 2004 by accident when I was a grad student at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So I was suffering, taking classes and doing research and spending too much time on that stuff and not enough time writing music. So I was complaining with this about some of my non-grad student friends in other parts of the country. And we all decided that what we were going to do was hold each other accountable to write some music. And we arbitrarily picked February in 2004, and we arbitrarily decided that we were going to write 1 song every other day for the entire month. All right, so we had a plan, but there was a slight problem. There were 4 of us in 4 different states spanning 3 different time zones. Your usual kind of songwriting group gets together physically once a week or something to share songs and give each other feedback. So we couldn't do that. So what we did instead was create a blog. That's what everybody does today. So we created this multi-author blog and posted songs as we wrote them. And that way we could download the MP3 demos and things and give each other feedback in the form of comments. By the end of that month, we'd collectively written 66 songs, and all 4 of us met the 14-song goal. All right, so we were pretty excited about this. And it wasn't actually intended to become an annual ongoing thing originally. It was just a one-off project. But over the course of the next year, I started getting emails from dozens of songwriters who just, by surfing around, had stumbled across this blog and were like, can we participate in this next year? So I thought, why not? I registered the FALM.org domain name and set up a multi-author WordPress blog, which actually powered the website up until about 2008, and it runs custom software that I wrote from scratch today. But anyway, in 2005, that second year, there were 72 registered FALMers. FALMer is the term that we use for the people who participate. 25 winners in the sense that they wrote 14 songs, and we had 513 new songs that were written collectively among all of us. And it's just continued to grow ever since then. So this is a growth curve of the number of farmers who've registered over the last 8 years. It's kind of a quadratic looking curve. And interestingly though, so this is the cumulative number of registered accounts. Interestingly though, if we look at the number of songs that are written, not cumulatively, but within a given year, it started out looking like this kind of quadratic growth curve, and then after 2010, it just kind of stopped growing. I mean, it continued to grow, but not nearly at the same accelerated rate. So why this recent slowdown? Well, one idea is that if you actually look at 2012, so this past February, 2 months ago, if you were to take all of the music that was written and posted to the website and line it up from start to finish in iTunes and try to listen to it without shuffle or repeat, it would take you just shy of 27 days to listen to all of the music. And there's 28 days in February typically. So it appears like maybe there's some law of nature that's pushing us. So this has led me to the FOM escape velocity theory. Somebody chuckle. There you go, okay. So escape velocity, in case you don't know, I'm not a physicist either, but it's the speed at which an object needs to break free of a gravitational field. So like if we have a cannon that's shooting something across planet Earth, if it's not fast enough, it'll land back on Earth like point A or B. Maybe it's fast enough to achieve a spherical orbit or an elliptical orbit, but we need to be really fast to break free of the orbit. And that's E. So if you pardon the metaphor, this is maybe 28 days worth of music, and we need some machine learning to help us build a better creativity cannon. All right, I know this is corny, but moving on. Today I'm going to talk about 2 projects, preliminary projects that I've done in the context of FOM to try and help the people who are involved, explore their creative ideas. So one are these computational creativity tools. And then I'll also talk about a study where we use machine learning methods to analyze social motivators in personal online goal-setting communities like FOM. So this first work on computational creativity tools was presented at a workshop co-located with the NAACL conference a couple years ago. And so, just out of curiosity, how many of you are musicians in the room? Poets? Writers? Even of academic papers? All right, so this is a very uncreative crowd. No, I'm just kidding. So anyway, creating is tough work, especially when you're on a deadline, and so FOM is a challenge for the people who take it on. The goal is to write, on average, a song every 2 days. So people liken it to a musical marathon. So right out of the gate, maybe in the first day or two, maybe you write 3 or 4 songs, and you're feeling pretty good. Then halfway through the month, it's Valentine's Day, and you've got new inspiration. You can write a love song for your boyfriend or girlfriend or spouse and how much you love them, or the boyfriend or girlfriend you just broke up with and how much you hate them. But by the end of the month, you're totally out of ideas. So the goal of this work was to kind of create intelligent tools based on statistical language models to help the participants of the challenge, first of all, obtain, and then second of all, develop new lyrical ideas for their songs. So I'm going to talk specifically about 2 different tools, one aimed at the obtaining part and the other at kind of the developing part. And there has been some previous work on analyzing the content of song lyrics, but most of it has been based on prediction and classification, like predicting the genre. Is this a hip hop song or a heavy metal song or a folk song? Or maybe quantifying the hit potential, based on how many times the word baby appears in the lyrics, how likely is it to be a top 10 hit, which I might argue is actually the opposite of creativity. But and there's also been some work on text generation for fiction, like generating narrative sequences, and even poetry, And there's even been a little bit of work on music lyric generation. Like if you input a particular beat, it tries to generate nonce lyrics. So by nonce lyrics, they're just like automatopoeic, like boom chicka bop bop bop, stuff like that, instead of actual narrative content. But none of this work has actually been focused. It's either been focused on making some predictions about songs that are already written, or using the computer as like a computational poet instead of as a computational tool to help a human songwriter in their craft. One exception to this is actually a program that was developed by the pop star David Bowie. This is actually, if you're interested, I think this is still on YouTube. There's a segment from the documentary Inspirations in 1997 where he talks about this. The verbicizer, which he developed with a friend of his in Silicon Valley. So what it does is take seed text as input and then just munges words together and generates random permutations. And the documentary shows kind of his process of generating new, winnowing those down into new song ideas. But most of the output from this system is gibberish. Like there's no actual language modeling, and it requires a whole lot of manual filtering. So it takes a whole lot of work to kind of separate, find the needle in the haystack. So this suggests two maybe criteria for developing computational creativity tools. So one, we want these tools to suggest novel items, things that are unlike the majority of the items that already exist. So we want these suggestions to be rarities or outliers. And second of all, we want these items to be meaningful in some sense. If a suggestion is an outlier, a random proposal might be an outlier, but it might not be something that's very easy to work with or very useful. So the training data I used in this was just I built a screen scraper that went across one of these ubiquitous online lyrics databases and gathered about 140,000 songs that represent about 16,000 unique artists. Most of them were in English and spanning several different genres and a variety of artists, all the way from like top 40 down to more obscure bands. So, and just a quick disclaimer, this work is not amazing new language modeling, and it's not state-of-the-art text synthesis either. And instead, it's a description of two simple creativity tools that were actually deployed online and used by the songwriters during the February album writing month task, and it's fun. So the first tool I called Titular, and this generates up to 5 song title suggestions. So here are some suggestions actually generated, like Bleeding in the Laughter, Don't Spin Your Judgment, Heads of Trick. Interestingly, is anybody in here a fan of the artist St. Vincent? Okay, well, she's got a song called Laughing with a Mouthful of Blood, so when I saw Bleeding in the Laughter, that actually came to my mind. Anyway, so here's some possible song titles that people might see and then choose whether or not to develop into a song idea. And the approach is a template-based generation method, which is pretty common in text synthesis. But instead of manually specifying the templates, we're going to actually induce them from data. So the approach is fairly simple. We take the corpus of 14,000 lyrics and part-of-speech tag them using an off-the-shelf part-of-speech tagger. So walking with a zombie becomes a gerund verb, followed by a preposition, a determiner, and then a single noun. And then we'll induce lexicalized templates from these part-of-speech sequences where we retain the closed word classes, like determiners, prepositions, and conjunctions. So these are the parts of language that tend to be static and don't change within a language. And then we create variables for all the open word classes. So these are like nouns, verbs, adjectives. So these are the things where in a language we tend to create new examples of them. And so now we'll end up with a song title template like verb gerund with a noun. And then we also have a production from the verb gerund and the noun into walking and zombie. And then we also cull production rules with low frequencies just to mostly to filter out errors from the part-of-speech tagger, because it's not perfect, and it actually wasn't trained to be used on sequences of text that were this short. It was really intended for more newswire length text. So here are some examples of some of the templates that were induced. The most commonly occurring one was actually an adjective followed by a noun, like Irish Rover. There's a lot of songs that are just a verb, interestingly. So, you had a lot of interesting, coordination, verb and noun. So these song titles sort of make sense. And now once we've induced these templates, how do we generate new titles? So first, once we have all these templates and these frequency counts, we can induce like a multinomial distribution over these templates. And then just sample some new template from that distribution. So we might end up with an interjection followed by an adjective and then a noun. And then for each of the variables in this template, we'll sample from a similar multinomial distribution over words conditioned on each of the parts of speech. So we might sample "Oh Little Life," and now we've got our new song title, "Oh Little Life." Has a poetic ring to it. So this actually wasn't the first thing I tried. The first thing was actually just an n-gram language model, where we generate words based on some previous history of words. The interesting thing was, though, this didn't really work because it had this tendency to just regurgitate existing song titles. So if we use a history of one, so if we try to sample a new word based just on what the previous word was, 35% of all of the song titles that are generated were actually pre-existing song titles. So there's no novelty here. And actually, as we crank the history up, with a history of 4, actually, almost all of the song titles that are generated tend to be.
Are these n-grams of words or those classes?
So these are n-grams of words. Right. It could perhaps be improved by variabilizing, but there are some problems with that too for long-range syntactic dependencies and things like that.
So the title comes first or the song in this case?
The title of the song?
Yeah, so are you kind of like deciding on the title after the song has been written?
No, so this is like you're just starting from de novo. I'm a songwriter, I have no ideas at all. I'm just gonna get a few song title ideas just to get the ball rolling and see, can I write a song around this title? And the other thing is, when it does tend to come up with novel song titles, they tend to be this long, arduous things that don't make any sense, like "Too many a woman first the dark clouds will it up." So this kind of violates our second criterion of something that maybe is an outlier, but it still doesn't make much sense. So some other advantages of the templates, by constraining words by their part of speech, by like their word class, instead of just their adjacent words, this can possibly allow, hopefully, for some more novel and interesting juxtapositions of ideas. So this is good for like our criteria number 1 of the novelty. And it also helps ensure that the titles are well formed with respect to longer range syntactic dependencies like parenthesis matching and things like that. And so they tend to be more sensible suggestions. And also just as a practical step, because this was a real tool that I was intending to deploy for songwriters to use perhaps hundreds simultaneously, and we couldn't store everything in memory, this resulted in fewer database hits to sample words and templates from. So the second tool that I developed for this particular work was called LyricCloud. And the idea is for given an input word like dream, it generates like a tag cloud of semantically correlated words. So some of the suggestions might be parts of phrases that involve the word dream, like American dream or broken dream or bad dream, fulfill a dream. Some of the words are rhymes or near rhymes, like smithereen. And some of the words are synonyms or antonyms, like nightmare. So the idea is here, once you've already started working on a song and you've got an image in mind, you want to pop it in and just get a little help in free associating for the other types of words that you might want to include in your lyrics. So I took an information retrieval kind of view of the task here, where if you're given a seed term S, you want to get suggestions of new words based on some similarity measure. And this measure is basically just the log-tempered TF-IDF score. And the idea is to generate a graph for each word of its 300 nearest neighbors according to this similarity metric, and then randomly pick 25 out of those nearest neighbors and view them sized in proportion to the similarity score. So once again, this wasn't the first thing I tried. The first thing I thought of was to use a topic modeling approach like latent Dirichlet allocation. So here's actually when I ran LDA on the lyrics corpus. Here are some of the topics that came out, like love, baby, give, true, sweet song, girl, and love, find, nothing, something, everything, wrong, give. Yeah. Yeah, baby, hey man, girl, rock on, ooh. So the problem with this, so I actually implemented and deployed a version of this and during kind of a pilot phase, and when people tried to use it, they complained that the words were uninteresting and it was difficult to see their connection with the seed word. And so this kind of violates our criterion. Like it just tended to pick just really frequently occurring words rather than something that actually was tied to the seed. And so here's a timeline of this particular project. I had this idea on February 12th of 2010, so midway through the FOM project. I spent 4 days to kind of quickly develop and test these, and then deployed it online for people to use for the second half of the month to kind of collect data about how they were used. And so just some anecdotal results. So they were deployed at this website. It's still online and still being used. You can check it out if you want. There were, within those 13 days, there were 12,000 visitors from 55 countries, mostly from the USA, England, Canada, basically English-speaking countries, and Germany. And 29% of the traffic actually came from unaffiliated websites. So as soon as the announcement was made, people started blogging about it. Other songwriting forums kind of latched onto it, Facebook and Twitter links and so on and so forth. Which I thought was kind of interesting that there was that much interest actually outside the FOM community. There were 2 other tools that I didn't actually discuss because they don't use any machine learning or language modeling, called plot, spline, and structure. But it's interesting to see that the proportion of activity of the website, most people spent most of their time using the 2 tools that actually used machine learning and language modeling, which is kind of interesting, I think, in part because they're doing these kind of interesting and quote-unquote intelligent things, and maybe are more helpful. Within that first year, titular was used to write 98 songs within those 13 days, officially. I mean, it could have been used by more people, but there were 98 songs that people actually tagged their song as having used titular, and 38 songs using LyricCloud. So really only a tiny fraction of the total number of songs. These were the most queried LyricCloud seeds: love, friend, time, heart, cat, dance, and dream. So all of those kind of make sense to me except for cat. And here are just some examples. So this is a songwriter from Cambridge, England. I will play you a segment of it. So this is actually the demo recording that she did during February of the song right after she wrote it. And her description is, this is a song about the little voice in you that stops you from doing things that are fun because you're not a child anymore and can't really get away with doing them. whole song, but all of that started from just the title, I Am Your Adult, which was suggested by the titular tool. There was another really ambitious guy who decided to write a song that was constrained by all 4 of the tools. So for the Bethlehem of Manhattan was suggested by titular, and there was a collection of words that were suggested by Lyric Cloud, and he decided he had to use all 25 of them. And he also used a song structure and a plot spline that were suggested by the other 2 tools. And he said it was like doing a puzzle. The result is actually quite surprisingly coherent and good. So even though on the surface these things may seem sort of weird, there's some, at least anecdotal evidence that people are making good use of these tools to come up with new ideas. In addition to just these anecdotal results, I wanted some kind of empirical evaluation. So I generated 200 test outputs per tool, and then solicited judgments using Amazon Mechanical Turk. This was in part to get some kind of quantification of how well these tools were doing, but also to get some objective feedback from like these nonpartisan Turkers, because if we had asked the FOM participants to do the evaluations, they're kind of biased because we built these tools for them to use, and maybe they'll be overly optimistic about evaluations. So there were a mix of yes/no questions and ratings on a 5-point Likert scale, and we used 3 mechanical Turkers per instance to evaluate. So here's some of the results on titular. There were 3 basic questions. Is this a good title for a song? Is it a grammatical title for a song? And is it an offensive title for a song? And in general, so we compared the templates versus the bigrams versus an actual real song title from the database. And so not surprisingly, the template approach does better than the bigram approach, but not as well as a real title. The template approach, really none of them were that offensive. The template approach perhaps was least offensive because it took some effort to filter out some offensive language in the tool. And a second question was on a 5-point scale, how inspiring do you find this title to be? And so these are box plots that show the distribution of the ratings for the template bigram and a real title. The differences here are actually statistically significant between template and bigram, but using a Kolmogorov-Smirnov test. But they're actually not difference between the template and real title, which is kind of interesting. So they found the templates to be not significantly less inspiring, at least, than real titles. Some of the top-rated titles, The Lungs Are Pumping and Sure Spider Vengeance. And for a Lyric Cloud evaluation, there were 2 questions. One was the inspiration, just like in the last test. So here's the log-tempered TF-IDF similarity score. Here's the topic modeling approach. And here's just a cloud of random words that are scaled in size in a random order. And this, as you might expect, they found the TF-IDF approach to be the most inspiring. And we also asked about the relatedness. Does this word cloud, semantically make sense to you? Do you see the connection between the word suggestions and the seed word? And here also they found the TF-IDF approach to be to make the most sense. And all these differences were statistically significant even after Bonferroni correction. Interestingly, the R-square between these 2 measures is only 0.25. So knowing how related a set of words are actually can only explain about a quarter of the variance of how inspiring it is. So I think that's kind of an interesting disconnect that might be worth exploring in some sense. Another interesting anecdotal thing, one of the FOMers was an English teacher who actually decided to use Lyric Cloud in his English writing class. So he developed an assignment that all of the English teachers in the school in California actually used. And also has gotten some media coverage. So there was an AP article. I got interviewed in Marketplace and actually walked through each of the songwriting tools, and we wrote a song on the radio, which was kind of interesting. So some future directions here are obviously improving the language modeling. These are very simple approaches, maybe using something like a more proper probabilistic context-free grammar for titular, maybe adding n-grams rather than just single words for LyricCloud. And then maybe incorporating other creative writing devices, creating tools that are constrained by or help thinking around things like rhyme or alliteration, meter, repetition, and irony. And then maybe also taking user preferences as constraints. Like I want to make sure, just like LyricCloud constrains its word suggestions based on a seed word, maybe I want lyrical suggestions that are also rhymes, or that are also 5 syllables and things like that. And there's also this juicy new corpus that just came out at the beginning of the year, the Million Song Data Set, which is actually aimed at music information retrieval. It's mostly audio data, but there's tons of interesting metadata about the key signature and the time signature and the mode, whether it's major or minor, the tempo of the song, how many parts of the song there are, and it's cross-referenced with a bag of words model of the lyrics of the songs, as well as tags that came from the Last.fm kind of social. It's like Pandora. Are you familiar with Last.fm? Anyone? All right. At least a couple of you are getting something out of this talk. So I think it would be interesting to build kind of like a multimodal latent variable model where a person could say, I've got a song in A minor that's 100 beats per minute, and here's my title. And it can actually come up with suggestions like, here are some chords that maybe you should use, and here are some lyrical suggestions based on all of that information. So now we'll move on. I can pause here if there are any more specific questions about titular before moving on to part 2. Or
it seems to be a very simple extension if you can like change some theme about the titular. Maybe I can go into like hip-hop mode or something.
Right. Right. That's actually, yeah, allowing user preferences. So if we actually know like the genre of a particular song title, you could condition that multinomial distribution over the templates based on just all the production rules based on what genre it is. That's another extension that I've thought of, but haven't had time to do yet. Cool. So the second part of the talk will be using machine learning algorithms to help us analyze social motivators in personal goal setting communities like FOM. So there's lots of these kind of online goal setting communities where individuals attempt to some kind of personal goal in the context and company of others. So how many of you have heard of National Novel Writing Month? All right, like 3 of you, awesome. So the goal, this is actually kind of the model inspiration for FOM. I did this in 2003, and I wrote a terribly, abysmal 50,000 word novel in the month of November, along with, several thousand other people. But this still happens every November, where people try to write a whole novel in the month. Step Green is actually a research project in the Human-Computer Interaction Institute here. It's a social networking website where people come up with ideas and set goals for themselves to reduce their carbon footprint. Ravelry is an online knitting community where people are like trying to make sure that they knit so many yards per day. Lose It is a similar kind of weight loss social community. So there's several of these kinds of things that exist. And they have a lot of common features like milestone tracking, comparison with others, posting feedback and getting encouragement, and collaboration. So the FOM website, for example, there's a little counter, a meter actually. I can show you. So this is the actual FOM website. And there are these little meters that show your progress, how many songs you've written so far. And you can compare yourself against others. So, and the question is, how do these different features impact individual goal attainment? So what aspects of goal attainment and community-oriented behavior? Theoretically, what factors, these social interaction features increase individual goal achievement in a social setting? And practically, are there aspects of site design that we can tweak as a result of this knowledge to improve member goal achievement and improve the community cohesion as a whole? So like retention, people coming back the next year, doing pro-social behavior, like giving comments on each other's songs, etc. So there's actually a fairly long history in social science research of like what kinds of features of goal setting, activities lead to good outcomes. So having specific challenging goals, like I'm going to write 14 songs in 28 days, that's a good one. Having summary feedback, at day 14, I've written 7 songs, so I'm making good progress. I'm halfway there. So those have been shown to be very good predictors of success. And FOM has these features, but so does a spreadsheet. You don't actually need a website of other people who are doing it alongside of you to use these. So other factors that have been studied are like making goals public. So once you sign up for the website, you're making a statement. I'm going to write 14 songs in 28 days. Performing the tasks around others, you're spurred by arousal and competition. You see how other people are doing. Inhibited by distraction and apprehension, and affected by group productivity norms as well. Like if most of the people are only writing 1 or 2 songs, then you're probably not going to write more than 1 or 2 songs. But if everybody is trying to write 14 songs, then that'll really encourage you to write 14 songs. So these are actually social effects that go beyond, just a spreadsheet counter. This is where these kinds of online goal-setting communities actually can improve individual goal attainment. So in FOM, we specifically wanted to look at these kind of social interaction features. So first of all, publicly sharing goals. Second of all, getting and receiving comments on the songs that you post. And then also collaborating with other people on the songs that you write. And we wanted to study the effect that these had on certain goal-oriented outcomes, like whether or not they win or reach the 14-song goal, or even if they don't reach that goal, how many songs do they manage to write? And then we're also interested in community-oriented outcomes. So like, do they donate money to the website? Do they zong bust? So a zong in FOM parlance is a song with 0 comments so far. So it's kind of within the community ethos, like it's a good thing to go out and find a zong and be the first person to leave a comment on that song, because everybody deserves at least 1 comment on all their songs. So this is kind of a pro-social behavior that we're interested to see, can we encourage this behavior? And then also off-season interactions, like right now, it's not February, it's not during FOM, but there are still people on the forums chatting as recently as 17 hours ago. And then also returning the next year. There's some newcomer, do they find the experience valuable enough to come back the next year? So we can think of these as like features and these as labels, and it's starting to look a lot like a machine learning problem. So if we can induce kind of interpretable models that can predict these outcomes from those features, that can help us understand these relationships and maybe inform website design or policy, or maybe even looking into designing machine learning modules of the website that can actually be used in the loop to connect people to each other and improve both individual and group outcomes. So the approach was a series of regressions on 5 years worth of FOM server data from 2006 to 2010. We focused only on FOMers in their first year. So the first time that they joined, where they've kind of, they have a fresh outlook on the website, and their previous interactions don't necessarily influence the behaviors that we're looking at. So there were almost 2,000 FOMers that were part of the study, about 30,000 songs at this point, 90,000 comments, and 1,500 collaborations. And then we also cross-referenced this with a survey that was done over the summer of 2010, where we got 176 respondents to the survey. And the first thing that we wanted to study was just this act of making the songs public. So FOM does have this feature where you can set your songs to private. If you're really shy about it, or you don't want anybody to listen to your songs, or you don't want anybody's comment, you can lock them and mark them as private. And a few people did this. Actually, about 5% of all the FOMers that we looked at locked all of their songs. So they were basically using FOM as a spreadsheet. And the question is, how do they fare in comparison to others? So these are the results of a negative binomial regression on the number of songs written, so predicting the number of songs that they write, controlling for age and gender. This first line here, so this is a typical public farmer will write about 9.7 songs on average in their first year. Whereas the farmers who sign up but mark everything as private, they write only 5.2 songs, so almost half as many songs. And here's some quotes to kind of back up this idea that the public farmers write more songs. There's just something about being able to enter a place where everyone else is doing what you're doing, and that makes it easier to put out music. I never write as much post or pre-farm. Or I felt very plugged into the community and drew a lot of inspiration. So these are quotes that came from our survey in the summer. So a second thing that we looked at was receiving comments. So just like on YouTube and things like that, when you post something, you can make comments. This is actually perhaps my favorite comment that I've ever received on one of my songs. You may be able to impute who it was by. So William Cohen is a professor in the machine learning department, and I got him to participate in FOM last year. So his response to one of my songs was, "Dear Dr. Pastries, we are pleased to inform you that your submission number 15071, Psychic Driving, has been accepted to the February album writing month. Of the 4,392 submissions, yours is the only one accepted, and in fact, the only one the program committee was willing to review. We congratulate you on the quality of your work. Below are the comments from the program committee. Appropriateness to venue, 2. Presentation, good production quality, but the paper is not completely self-contained. The target audience will be familiar with some technical terms, e.g. Telecaster, which is a type of electric guitar, in case you're not familiar, but may be confused with some of the more obscure ones, especially Pollux. Because, never mind. Anyway, technical content acceptable for a conference. However, if the authors elect to submit to an extended version to a journal, they should consider extending the current benchmark set of 10 to 12 Astor rhymes to at least 50. All right, yeah. So I'm going to cherish this one forever. So the effects of comments, receiving comments on your songs, what kind of effect do those have on these individual goal attainment and group cohesion kind of outcomes we're interested in? So our method here was to take a snapshot of a farmer at the very beginning of their very first song that they ever post to the website. So they're a clean slate. And then controlling for gender and age, look at the impact of 2 variables. One, did they receive any comments on that first song within a week? And then 2, did any of those comments contain any social identity language? So going just beyond whether or not they received a comment, did that comment include any kind of inclusive language? So here's some results looking at farmers. So this is, again, a negative binomial regression predicting the number of songs that they write in their first year. If they receive no comments, a farmer can be expected to write about 8.4 songs in their first year. Whereas if they do receive any comments in that first week, then it goes up. There's a 21% increase in the number of songs that they write. And the difference is pretty statistically significant. So this leads to the question, are all comments created equal? Or are there certain comments that have reward functions or social connection, social cohesion kinds of effects? So to study this, we created a second variable for social identity language, which was actually fairly rare. Only about 2% of all the comments had this. But the variable we set to 1 if any of the comments had we words like we and us and our, which were taken from the linguistic inquiry word count, I believe is what that stands for. It's commonly used in social science and HCI work. And then we also had a list of 21 words that were FOM jargon words, like farmer and fawk, like whoa, yes, rock, or fuck, whichever you prefer. I think it's the best intro to a song. I've heard this FOM, or listening to this, I'm suddenly reminded that you are the only farmer who has made me cry more than once with your music, so on and so forth. So do they include this kind of insular vernacular, within the FOM community? And it turns out that if the comments do contain the social identity language, then there's an additional 27% increase in the number of songs. Although the difference is not as statistically significant because these kinds of comments turn out to be pretty rare for a newcomer on their first song. Now this is just predicting their song output for the first year. Now if we take again this snapshot of the very first set of comments that they receive on their very first song and look further into the future, it turns out there's an even more significant increase. Like out of their entire tenure being involved in FOM, we can predict if they receive no comments that they write 12.6 songs, whereas they write more than twice as many songs if they receive social identity comments in their first song. So the FOMers who received comments both on their first song were both more productive in their first year and in the long term. Now what about pro-social behavior? So here's a logistic regression trying to predict the likelihood of whether or not a FOMer will donate money to help the website. So here, as a baseline, a typical FOMer that didn't get any comments is 21% likely to donate any amount of money to help run the website. FOMers who did get comments, that increases to 35% likely. And FOMers who received social identity comments were more than half. There was more than half a chance that they would donate some money to the website. And we see similar behavior also for the likelihood of returning the following year, doing future Zong busts, like the number of these Zongs that they seek out to find to be the first person to give a comment on, and also spending time chatting in the off-season in the forums. Some more color quotes. I felt like I was part of a community. I felt like I mattered. And I was making new friends. I felt I was being challenged, poked and prodded to grow and stretch musically. And comments show that people listened to and got my songs. So that's very important to a lot of the people who are involved in the community. And the last thing that we'll look at is collaborations. So I said at the beginning that during a leap year, the goal is to write 14 and a half songs in 29 days because we get this extra day in a leap year. In 2008, just as a joke, I said, hey, let's everybody write an extra half a song, where that half a song is a collaboration with somebody else. And the community really kind of latched onto this idea, and actually about 8% of all songs that are posted, even in non-leap years, tend to be collaborations. And this became an interesting opportunity to study the effect of people's willingness to collaborate with others and the impact that that has both on their individual and group outcomes. So just as an example of a collaboration, this is a FOMer named Becca Palm. She's a jazz pianist from Seattle. And she posted in the forums, sometimes I wish I had one of those screamer voices that I could do a raspy, acid, rage-filled rocker song. Maybe one of you rockers will take me under your axe and help me bring out my inner artistic angst. And that challenge was met by Sapient Network, who is one of our thrash metal gurus from the Netherlands. And they produced this particular song. Wait for it. I'm actually going to skip ahead to all right, just to put that in context, this is what she usually sounds like.
With my salty tears, I'm searching for something more.
All right. So this is the sort of thing that comes out of a lot of these FOM collaborations. There have also been these super groups where people decide to come together and be like the Backstreet Boys, or like the what's a girl super group, like TLC or something like that. Anyway, so the method here was actually to take a snapshot of a newcomer farmer at the end of their first year and study the impact of the binary variable whether or not he or she collaborated with anyone over the course of that first year. And what we're going to do instead of predicting the total number of songs is we're only going to try and regress on the number of solo songs that they wrote. This is because there's some endogeneity. If you've got some newcomer that wrote 14 songs and all 14 of them were collaborations, then there's a problem there. So we're in effect penalizing people for collaborations in terms of this prediction measure. So it's a very conservative estimate. So here's some of the results. A farmer who does not collaborate in their first year writes, on average, 9.5 songs. Whereas a farmer who collaborates at least one time can be expected to write about 14.2 songs. And this difference is very statistically significant. And also, so this is just people looking at their first year. If we peek ahead at the second year farmers who collaborated in their first year write about a third more songs than second-year farmers who have never collaborated at all, even controlling for their first-year song count. So somebody who wrote a mediocre or like a medium number of songs in their first year but collaborated tends to write more songs in their second year than somebody who did not collaborate, even if they wrote a lot of songs in their first year. So there seems to be like a very strong association with this collaboration behavior and individual success. There's also a strong association with donating money, returning the next year, performing song busts, and future off-season posts is increased, but the difference is the impact is not very statistically significant. Here's some also quotes that people had to say about collaborations. They make you a better songwriter in every way. My mind continues to be blown away every time at what I can accomplish with a partner. And once I began collaborating, even on a limited basis, those quickly became some of my favorite experiences and favorite songs. So this leads to a question of, actually, I think I'm going to skip through this part just because we're running short on time. The gist of it is we then had tried to induce models that, based on features of pairings, like the cosine similarity of the text fields, like lyrics and things like that, or their geographical distance from one another, can we predict whether or not people thought a collaboration was a successful collaboration or yielded a high-quality song relative to their solo output? If you're interested in this, you can actually read more about it in the paper. But I think some opportunities for machine learning actually in the loop here are to create things like a song commenting recommender system. So to steer song, right now people find songs to comment on either by just guessing at random or by commenting on the songs of their friends. But what if there were a more sophisticated system that could identify, you would be a person who probably will enjoy this song. And so you're more likely to give some positive and constructive feedback on this song, which will benefit both you because you enjoyed it, and the person who wrote the song because it will give them some encouragement, and perhaps even build a bond between the two of you, and improve like group cohesiveness. And also like a collaboration matchmaker, like an online dating service or something, to predict good pairings of people who are likely to yield successful or high quality output if they were to collaborate together. So some limitations of this work, it's difficult to draw any causal conclusions. This is very common for these kinds of observational studies. We can only study the correlations between these behaviors and these particular outcomes. And we're also lacking training data for song quality. We're using song quantity as kind of a proxy for creativity or although I believe that quantity and quality are related. Like Linus Pauling once said, he was asked, how do you have so many great ideas? And he says, you have to have a lot of ideas and then just throw away the bad ones. So, and time and time again, I think that's been evidenced in FOM, people who tend to write a lot of songs, a lot of them are junk, but they are also more likely to write high quality songs. And we also don't really have any data on when people initiate a collaboration, but it just doesn't work out. We got a little bit of that information from the surveys, but not really a comprehensive amount of data. So just wrapping things up, talked about 2 ways in which machine learning methods can be used to support creativity in an online goal-setting community. First, these creativity tools that are based on generative models trained on data to assist songwriters, and then also these interpretive predictive models from social network data that can help us kind of understand the relationship between these online social behaviors and both individual and group outcomes. So I'll take any questions you have at this point.
So you had an interesting bit about how, like, a study of how social effects influence the songwriting process. I was wondering about the creative process. How does the creative process work, and why is this helpful? Can you study that?
Yeah, so actually, I've started talking with Stephen Dow, who's a professor in the HCII, and we're beginning to look into ways of doing a study, basically, of in collaborative songwriting, what are the parameters that you can tweak to yield good, to measure like creativity, more creative outcomes and things like that. So it needs to be a separate study than something wrapped in, I think, to the monthly challenge. But and just remember, Delicious Pastries is playing next couple of Fridays.